Well, hey there and welcome to the church video series. We are in the home stretch, and in these last two lessons in the video editing portion of this video training, you're going to learn my favorite tips and tricks for video editing. And hopefully these techniques are going to catapult your next video to another level and hopefully provide you with some inspiration for your next edit as well. In this first tips and tricks lesson, we're going to look at 5 cuts that you can make within your video editing, and in the next lesson, the second one of this tips and tricks little group, we're going to look at 5 philosophies that I always take in to my video editing. But before we get to that, let's start with the 5 different cuts. Number 1, the jump cut. Okay, so you've got your footage, it's in your timeline, and now it's time to start slicing and splicing it up to create a unified story. And if you want to spice things up, one of the type of edits that I like to use is called a jump cut. And the reason that we're starting off with this jump cut is because it's very simple. It doesn't require any color correction, visual effects, or anything like that. All it requires is the cut tool. A jump cut is used when you have your camera set in a single place and you sequence the shots where the framing is the same, but the subject within the frame shifts slightly. And this type of cut works great when there is a sense of elapsed time or movement in the shot. So, for example, let's say you're working with a shot that has a couple leaving their car door and walking towards their home. Now, obviously, you probably don't want to show this full 15-second journey. And so what you can do is you can use a jump cut, and what that's going to do is it's going to shorten up the movement in a great deal, and you're also still going to get the sense of them completing their journey, but it's also going to be a cool edit. It's going to be dun, 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 and they're there. Number 2, fast cuts. When you're editing on your timeline, make sure that you're considering how long that you're holding each one of your shots. Maybe you don't have this problem, but when I first started out, I was always so enamored with the footage that I had shot, which was clearly delusion, that I would hold the shots way too long, and instead of cutting them faster like I should have, I would just hold a shot for an extended period of time because I thought it looked so beautiful. But in fact, it was quite boring. So when you're editing, make sure that you're switching up the shots quickly so that your viewer is staying interested and engaged. Number 3, the establishing shot. I made mention of the establishing shot in a previous lesson, but it needs to be said here again. And the establishing shot is what happens when you're establishing the context of what's about to take place. The most classic establishing shot that I can think of is the classic sitcom Seinfeld, and every time they were eating at their favorite diner, it would show outside of the diner with its big red neon lights that read restaurant. And this established what was about to happen next. Every time that establishing shot was used, the shot to follow it was always the gang in the diner eating and discussing something. And when I say something, I mean, of course, nothing. And not only did this work well as a transition from the previous scene, but it also set the stage of what was about to happen next. An establishing shot is always a very nice piece of B-roll to have in your back pocket during an edit. So on your next shoot, make sure that you shoot 1, 2, maybe even 3 establishing shots for your edit. Number 4, slow motion. A type of edit that has really become synonymous with cinematic storytelling as well as church video in the last couple of years is slow motion. Slow motion is best achieved when you shoot in a higher frame rate, like let's say 60 frames per second, and then when you bring it in your editing timeline, you slow that down to the regular 24 frames per second. And what happens is you get very silky slow motion from that clip because you have all these extra frames to show every single movement. Using slow motion is great for B-roll because the slow motion will tell a story in and of itself. Slow motion is very dreamy and powerful, so harness that power and dreaminess in your next edit. Number 5, the time lapse. Now this 5th and final type of cut is going to require a lot more foresight than the others perhaps, but it's also going to reap maybe the biggest rewards. Think of this like the opposite of slow motion. In slow motion, everything is slowed down. It's like time is standing still. And the feel you get from it is very dreamy, it's very hopeful, it's you looking towards the future. But the exact opposite is true with a time lapse, because in a time lapse, everything is sped up. And the feel that you get is one of how big the world is. And it's focusing on the here and now and things going by really, really fast. And if you really want to use an advanced move, try using a time-lapse as an establishing shot. It's like 2 tips at once. Well, that concludes this list of 5 editing tips and tricks, and in the next lesson, I'm going to share 5 more that you can also use in your video edits. In this lesson, we focused on real types of edits and techniques that you can use while video editing. But in the next lesson, we're going to talk about 5 philosophies that you can use when you're approaching your video edits to make sure that you're compositing the best videos possible. So I'll see you in that next lesson.